march of maidens went on and on. The bride walked by the tables loaded with gourmet goodies and absent-mindedly sampled first the little pink, green, and yellow mints. Then she sorted through the silver bowls of mixed nuts and ate all the pecans, followed by a cheese ball or two, some black olives, a handful of glazed almonds, a little sausage with a frilly toothpick in it, some shrimp blanketed in bacon, and a cracker piled with liver pate. To wash this all down, a glass of pink champagne. Her father gave it to her to calm her nerves.
What you noticed about the bride as she stood in the doorway was not her dress, but her face. White, for what was coming down the aisle was a living grenade with the pin pulled out. The bride threw up right as she walked by her mother. And when I say threw up, I don't mean a polite lady like Earp into her handkerchief. I mean she puked. There's just no nice way of putting it. I mean she hosed the front of the chancel, hitting the groom, 2 bridesmaids, a ring bearer, and the minister. I am quite sure of the details. We have it on videotape. 3 cameras worth. The MOTB had thought of everything.
Having disgorged her hors d'oeuvres, champagne, and the last of her dignity, the bride went limp in her father's arms, and the groom sat down where he was standing, too stunned to function. The mother of the bride moaned, slumped over, and passed out cold.
Then and there, a fire drill that only the Marx brothers could have taught. Groomsmen rushed about heroically. Many princesses squalled, bridesmaids sobbed, and people with weak stomachs headed for the exits. The smell of French wretch drifted across the church.
Only 2 people were seen smiling. One was the mother of the groom. The other was the father of the bride.
What happened next? Well, we all went back to real life. Guests were invited to adjourn at the reception hall, though they didn't eat or drink as much as they might have in different circumstances. The bride was cleaned up and consoled and fitted with the bridesmaid's dress, and kissed and hugged a lot by the bride. She will always love him for that. When he said for better or worse, he meant it. The cast was reassembled where they left off, and a single flute played a quiet air. The words were spoken, and the deed was done. People cried like they're supposed to do at weddings, mostly because the groom held the bride in his arms throughout the entire ceremony, and no groom ever kissed a bride as tenderly as he.
If one should hope that their wedding be memorable, then theirs was a raging success. Nobody who was there will ever forget what happened.
They've lived happily ever after, happier than most, in fact. They've been married for 12 years, and they have 3 lively children.
But that's not the end of the story. On the 10th anniversary of this disastrous affair, a party was held, a feast was laid, best friends invited, and 3 TV sets mustered. Remember, there were 3 video cameras on the scene of the accident. All 3 videotapes were played at once. The effect was very interesting, especially with the running commentary and the stop-motion stuff that was a little gross when played frame by frame. The part that got cheers and toasts was when the camera focused on the grin of the father of the bride as he debated whether or not his wife would be revived.
I like this part the most, not because of the story, but because of who organized it. The MOTB, the mother of the bride, is still at it today. She's a lot looser now, and she not only forgave her husband and everybody else for their part in the debacle, but she also forgave herself. And nobody laughed as hard as those videos as she.
There's a word for what she has. Grace.
That's why the same grinning man has been married to her for 40 years, and why her daughter loves her still.
1963. From deep in the canyon aisles of the supermarket comes what sounds like a small-scale bus wreck, followed by an air raid. If you followed the box boy armed with his mop and broom, you would come upon a young father, his 3-year-old son, an upturned shopping cart, and a good part of the pickle shelf, all in a heap on the floor. The child, who is not hurt, sits in a small lake of pickle juice. He's experiencing what might nicely be called significant fluid loss. Tears mixed with mucus from a runny nose, mixed with blood from a small forehead abrasion, mixed with saliva, which is coming from a mouth that is making a noise that would drive a dog under a bed. The father has stayed amazingly still in the face of this catastrophe. The father is calm because he's thinking about running away from home. Thinking about just quietly turning and walking away. Nobody knows this is his kid. Just getting into his car, changing his name, and moving to California, maybe. Getting a job as a cook or a paper boy or something. Just anything that does not involve contact with 3-year-olds. In the most private part of his heart, he's sorry he ever had kids, sorry he married, sorry he grew up. But most importantly, sorry that this particular child cannot be traded in for a model that works. He will not and cannot say these things to anybody, ever. But they are there, and they're not funny. Later, the father sits in the parking lot holding the sobbing child until he falls asleep. They drive home, and the father brings his child up to his room and tucks him in. The father looks at his son for a long time. The father does not run away from home.
It is now 1976. The same father paces his living room. In his hand is what's left of a letter, crumpled and uncrumpled again. It's a letter from his 16-year-old son, the same son from the pickle juice incident, the pride of his father's eye, or was until today's mail. Now, the tables have turned. Now it's the son who is running away from home. He says he hates his father and wishes he never had one. He says his father is a jerk and a failure as a parent. And he ends the letter with, oh right, you can drop dead. The father is screaming at the ceiling, why me? Why me? Why me? Well, that answer is simple. He has a son. The son's 16. Stuff happens. Someday, some long day from now, the father may look back and laugh at even this. But for the moment, there was only anguish.
This is 1988. Same father, same son. And they're still running. Out jogging at 6 a.m. The son is 28 now, married, with a 3-year-old son of his own. The father is 50. As father and son cross the busy street, the son puts his hand on the father's elbow to hold him back from the dangers of oncoming traffic. You can hear them laugh as they run up the hill into the morning. And when they sprint towards home, the son does not run ahead, but runs alongside his father, at his father's pace. They love each other a lot. You can see that. And so they work to take care of that love.
Oh, there'll be times when they'll be mad at each other again.
And there'll be times when they love each other.
and one of their favorite stories will always be Once Upon a Time in a Supermarket. There are little clues my life is entering a new stage. My children are beginning to look middle-aged, and they pat me a lot, in a very patronizing manner for no apparent reason. I won't ask them why they do it. I'll take all the affection I can get in any way they want to dish it up. But another clue of change is the sudden desire to take small children on excursions. My granddaughter, Sarah, and I went on an adventure that sounds like the title of a B-grade children's storybook. Grandfather and granddaughter go to the zoo. First time. And there, we saw all the lions and the tigers and the bears and the giraffes and the gorillas and all the rest. Every last living creature the zoo had to offer, and even some possible dead ones. But for all of my... Oh, Sarah, look at the... Sarah was most impressed with the pigeons that hung around the concession stand. What she liked about the pigeons was that she could almost touch them, but not quite. No matter how carefully, cautiously, quietly she approached, the pigeons always managed to stay just one step further out of reach. The space between Sarah and the pigeons moved in concert, and she spent most of her time at the zoo trying to close this moving space. All of the other animals were over there, behind bars or moats or glass, in another world. But the pigeons were over here, and would be made even more real if she could just get her hands on one. Well, what would you do with it if you caught one, Sarah? She didn't know. Possessing was not in the plan. Just reaching out was all that mattered to her. Driving home in a thunderstorm, Sarah fell asleep in her car seat. In her parents' driveway, I sat and looked at her face for a long time. Who is this child? I wondered. I want to know her. Now that I am older and wiser, and have the time and patience I didn't as a father, I will approach Sarah as she approaches the pigeons, carefully, cautiously, quietly. And I will wonder as she does how one can be so close and yet so forever far at the same time. She's not mine, and she never will be. There are 2 people who think of her as their daughter, and there are 4 people who think of her as their granddaughter. But Sarah belongs only to herself. There will always be this moving space, this untraversable distance that must be treated with respect. And just as Sarah doesn't know what she would do if she ever actually caught one of the pigeons, I don't know what I would do if I ever caught Sarah. To love something and to possess it are not the same thing.
What do you do?
What do you do? Your basic stranger on a plane question.
Comes up at PTA potlucks.
In corporate cocktail parties.
And then you sit around and make small talk situation.
Tell us what you're paid to do, and we'll know who you are and how to deal with you.
What do you do?
I'm a singer. Not only do I not get paid to sing, but in some cases, friends might offer to pay me not to sing. Nevertheless, I love to do it. In the shower, driving to work, while I'm working, whenever. It's what I do. I loved it when my children were young and had no musical standards. We'd sing all the time. It didn't matter that we didn't know the words or didn't have the tune just right. That's okay, we made it up. We singers are not thrown by technicalities. Singers are those who sing, period.
What do you do?
I'm a prince.
A prince?
Yeah, just the other day, my wife said, "Sometimes you're a real prince." And you know what? I've been feeling like a prince ever since.
What do you do?
Marcel Duchamp, a sculptor and painter during the era of the 1940s, was quite frustrated by the implications of the "what do you do" inquiry. He responded, "I am a respirateur, a breather." He said that he did more breathing than anything else, and he was very, very good at it too. Usually by then, people were too afraid to ask what else he did.
What I do is more than what I'm paid to do. It's literally how I live my life. I reckon I spent about 2,500 hours just brushing my teeth.
30,000 hours in traffic.
35,000 hours eating.
217,000 hours at work.
870,000 hours just coping with odds and ends.
Filling out forms,
Paying bills.
Getting dressed and undressed.
being sick.
After you finish the arithmetic, there's not a lot of time left over.
But somehow, you have to make room for the good stuff.
Making a living, having a life, are not the same thing.
The most time-bound man I know lives in my neighborhood. He's always in a hurry and always late, always harassed and buzzed out. I'm not exactly sure what he does for a living exactly. It seems to involve with buying and selling something downtown. He's a businessman. His choice of appropriate transportation is a brand new Range Rover, a vehicle built by the British for the high adventures in the wilds of Africa. It is equally capable in steep canyons, quicksand, and blizzard conditions. It can outrun a lion and take a rhino charge head-on. This particular Veltmobile is equipped with a winch, a gun rack, a CB radio, as well as a very impressive stereo system, 2 phones, a fax machine, and a coffee maker in the glove compartment. Daily, I see my neighbor rushing out of his house, burdened with the impediments of high adventure, carrying golf bag, gym bag, lunch bag, raincoat, umbrella, coffee, a sack of garbage for the dumpster, and his briefcase. Now, about this briefcase. It is made of the purest, unblemished belting leather, the best part of the hides of 4 carefully selected cows who gave their lives that he might carry this talisman of success. It has solid brass fittings, a combination lock, and his name embossed in gold. So it's a Tuesday morning around 7 o'clock on a fine day in June. The neighbor lady and I hit the streets, headed for work about the same time. She's a social worker for the Episcopal Church and drives an 8-year-old Ford. Just give me there and back, please, God, sedan. And I drive a 1952 GMC, just go ahead and hit me pickup truck. At the same time, the owner of the Range Rover rushes up. His life is leveraged to the max these days, and his mind is in 3 continents at once. He grunts at us as he loads his lorry for the expedition downtown into the front seat and cranks the mighty engine like he's on the pole of the Indianapolis 500. Uh-oh, he left his coffee cup and briefcase on the top of his car, and there they remain as he rolls away. To the rescue comes nice lady social worker from the Episcopal Church in her Ford. She chases after him, urgently honking her horn, which he ignores because he's already on his cell phone talking to London. But finally, her unceasing finally gets the best of him. He throws his phone to the floor of the car, leans out the window, and shakes his fist at her. But The lady is focused on her rescue mission and continues to chase after him, waving him to stop. I, in the meantime, driving close behind as kind of a third float in this little parade, also try to get his attention with my auga horn I salvaged out of a Model A. The combination of and auga finally gets his attention. He jams on the brakes, flings open the door of his Veltmobile, and tries to get out without first unlatching his seatbelt. At that moment, his morning cup of coffee slides off the roof of the car, bounces off the hood, and smashes into the street. At that moment, the briefcase falls off the top of the car, crashes into the hood, scrapes across the paint with the fingernails on chalkboard screech, and flops into the street on top of the broken coffee cup. The dear lady, mission accomplished, goes slowly around the scene of the accident, grins at her neighbor, dangling from the clutches of his seatbelt, and sings out, "Have a nice day." And no, she did not, as you might have anticipated, run over the briefcase. No, she did not. I did. The nice neighbor lady and I meant well. It's not always easy doing good. Later, when I told her about running over the briefcase, she grinned. None of us is pure. Did I run over the briefcase on purpose? I don't know. As I say, none of us is pure.
Next. Next. Have you completed the form?
Where am I?
Have you completed the form?
Sure was a long climb up.
Yes. Have you completed the form?
Almost.
Almost?
I, just have one question.
A question?
Yeah,
Well,
about this one blank.
which blank?
The one that says religion.
Religion. Do you believe in God? Do you believe in God?
I believe in Howard.
You believe in Howard?
It all has to do with my mother's maiden name.
Your mother's maiden name.
Was Howard. And she was part of a big family in Memphis, the Howard family. So I grew up thinking of myself as a member of the Howard family.
What does this have to do with God?
Oh, well, it's really quite simple. See, around age 4, I was packed off to Sunday school, and there the first thing I learned was the Lord's Prayer, which begins, "Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." But what I heard instead was, "Our Father, which art in heaven, Howard be thy name." Since little kids tend to mutter their prayers anyway, nobody realized I was saying the wrong thing, so I went right on believing that God's name was Howard, and that I was a member of his family, the Howards. Around the same time, I was told my grandfather died and went up to heaven. God and my grandfather got all mixed up in my mind as one and the same, which meant that I had a pretty comfy notion about God. When I knelt beside my bed and prayed each night, "Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name," I thought about my grandfather and what a big shot he was. Because, of course, the prayer ends with, "For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen." I went to bed feeling pretty well connected to the universe for a long time.
You're putting me on, right?
No, not at all. I belonged to the whole big scheme of things. I lived and worked and had my being in the Howard family store. The whole universe was just a Howard family enterprise.
So, do you still believe in Howard?
Let me put it this way. The 13th century Christian mystic Meister Eckhart once said, The eye with which I see God is the eye with which God sees me.
What the hell is that supposed to mean?
Not only do I believe in Howard, Howard believes in me.
It's February, and I have an appointment for a physical. In the waiting room are two other people, both older than I, a very nice, intelligent-looking couple, probably in their 80s. So I'm sitting there in my February state of mind, and this old man next to me says,
Hey, Merry Christmas.
"This is February, right?" "Yeah, it's February." And so I look back at him, and I say, "Merry Christmas."
Oh, you better watch out. You better not cry.
He's singing.
You better not pout. I'm telling you why. Santa Claus is coming.
All the way to the end.
town.
And then he looks at me, and he says,
Hey, Merry Christmas.
and so I look back and I say, "Merry Christmas to you too." And I'm thinking, could be me. The nurse comes on, and the old man shuffles off.
We've been married for 60 years now, and Fred is 87. In our family, we say that his wiring's coming loose. He's had a few strokes, and there's some Alzheimer's in there. He's just getting old. But every once in a while, he'll just suddenly announce that it's Christmas. The first time, I thought I was crazy. I thought, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. He was just upstairs shouting, "Hey, it's Christmas Eve! Merry Christmas! Put up the tree!" I called the girls and told them about what happened. And here they came, with presents. They said to me, "For goodness sakes, Mother, it's not illegal." The best part of it all was that at the end, he said, "You know, I don't remember a lot from when I was a child. Tell me about Christmas when I was a little boy." You see, he had a terrible childhood. His mother was a drunk. His father ran off. He was virtually orphaned. He had to leave home at a very young age. But I didn't want to tell him about that. So I did something that I never thought that I would do to this man. I lied to him. I told him about the Christmas that he got a rocking horse, and the Christmas that he got a bike, and the Christmas that he was in the Christmas pageant. And he loved it. But the funny thing about it all was, at the end of the night, he forgot about it. It just left his mind. We never did get to Christmas. Christmas Eve and good memories seemed to be enough. But then 4 months later, it happened all over again. He was singing carols upstairs, and then here came Christmas down the stairs. "Merry Christmas!" And I thought, what's the harm? This has happened about 4 or 5 times now. In July, October, twice in December, and now in February. Every time, he asks me to tell him about his childhood, and I do. I'm getting so good at lying about how wonderful his Christmas was that I'm starting to believe it. Every time, our girls come over so they can give him presents and bake cookies and sing carols, all of it. Twice, we've even gone as far to put up the tree. And they love it.
Just then, the nurse and old Fred come shuffling back in.
What fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh.
Merry Christmas.
You know what? Merry Christmas.
You see, the girls don't think of it as Christmas anymore. They think of it as Father's Day. And I think of it as Valentine's Day. Merry Christmas.
A while back, I decided it was time to buy a cemetery plot. What an odd shopping experience. Popular wisdom says that the three most important things to consider in real estate are location, location, and location. But I thought, it's a grave. What difference does a view really make? And resale value? Not a problem. Well, I made my purchase. And now, from time to time, I like to go pay my respects at my final resting place. Going to my grave always helps untwist the snarls in my mind and soul, especially when I lose track of what's important. On a recent visit, I noticed that the neighboring property owners were James and Edith Grimm and Jacob Pleasant. Being buried between Grimm and Pleasant has a poetic rightness about it, don't you think? Late one night, I went up to the cemetery with my favorite blanket, and I stretched it out over my grave. Oh, stretched out. And was startled. This grave has an incredible view. Looking straight up, I could see starshine that was coming to me from millions of light years away. Trying to conceive the magnitude and complexity of space, I just stayed there, looking straight up into the infinite darkness, filled with all that light. I have never liked the verse that says, "From dust thou art, to dust thou shalt return." We are energy, which is interchangeable with light. We are fire, water, and earth. We are also dreams, hopes, and fears, pulled apart by folly and held together by wisdom. So much more than dust. The Bible verse should say, "Miracle thou art, and to mystery thou shalt return." The light I see from my grave comes to me from millions of light years away. It started traveling long before I was born. And its sources may have died out by now. Gone. That is scientific fact. But its light still shines on. My life gives off another kind of light. That light may be seen long after the source is gone.
I've become so caught up in my grown-up stuff. It seems I've lost some spontaneity. It seems I've lost perspective on living life. Every day at my job with my family. But I'm discovering all I really need to know. I learned in kindergarten about how to live, what to do, how to be. It's the sandbox code of ethics, not some grad school mumbo jumbo, that's had the greatest impact on me.